welcome to the Plenty of Positivity podcast. I am your host, Courtney Beck, and today we have Rob Jolles. Rob is a speaker, a 5-time best-selling author, a coach, and a podcast host. It is my absolute pleasure and honor to welcome Rob Jolles.
How nice is that? It's good to be here. Thank you. I'm ready to roll.
I am so excited for you to be here today on this podcast. Just preparing for this conversation, reading your background, you have a tremendous amount of experience in sales, in professional speaking, and of course, in writing books. Like I said before, a 5-time best-selling author. So I cannot wait to get into it right away. So Rob, if you could please provide our listeners an introduction.
Sure. Well, you gave me some of it. I'm always impressed to hear it. I go, is that guy me? I was a kind of a lowly insurance agent. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I came out of the University of Maryland, was just a life, health, and disability guy. But I got a couple years into it. I actually made more money selling life insurance. It took me almost 15 years to make more. So it had nothing to do with money. I just didn't feel like I was put on the earth to sell life insurance, certainly not to 22-year-olds. So they made me a sales trainer after a couple years, and I loved that performance fix. I'd done some acting in my 20s, met my wife in a show, and thought, well, I'm getting kind of an acting buzz out of this. And so I took it on to Xerox. They put me in the field to sell. Sold copiers, memory writers. I sold typewriters. I love selling typewriters. They were almost gone at that point, but you could always put a typewriter on a desk for $300 and then give me a couple months and I'll have that $250,000 machine out of the way. That's the one I want. So I sold fax, memory writers, copiers, printers. And then I became a trainer for Xerox, managed the trainers at Xerox, ran their customer training. And then as LinkedIn just informed me last Friday, 32 years ago, I went out and decided I was going to give this professional speaking thing a kick in the tail. And here I am. I'm still standing.
Well, a big congratulations on 32 years of professional speaking, a truly remarkable accomplishment there, Rob. I want to take it back, though. As you had mentioned, you began your career at New York Life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reading this book, excellent book, highly recommend it, How to Change Minds, The Art of Influence Without Manipulation. Now, at the beginning, you have a very powerful quote, I thought, with New York Life and Xerox. So you state, New York Life taught me to love to sell. And then Xerox taught me how to sell. So
Right.
Could you please elaborate on that?
Sure. Absolutely. And it's funny. I wasn't sure which quote you were getting. And I thought, oh, I love that quote.
Did it surprise you, Rob?
Because, I just kind of fumbled around. I was raised by a salesman. I mean, I kind of loved selling. And New York Life kind of, brought that spirit out in me. But I never really learned a process. My process was to sell 2 a week and 10 a month, and don't let us catch you in the bullpen. That was my sales process. I learned 2 scripts, one called the Live, Die, Quit story, one called the 100-Man story. And they were, the 100-Man story had a great finish. It was, at the end, when you tracked where they all went, by the time they got to retirement, it was a very small percentage that made it to a comfortable retirement. And the punchline was, they didn't plan to fail. They failed to plan. So I was learning scripts and things like this. And then when I got to Xerox, oh my goodness, there was this process in place. It's like, well, you want to create trust? Here's a process. You want to create urgency? Here's a process. Openings, closing, objection handling, personality. Everything seemed to be more repeatable and predictable. And as a athlete, I kind of liked that of, okay, I was a point guard. I want to be a good shooter, but there's a technique to it. It isn't just go get me 20 points. It's here's the process behind that. I mean, perhaps as an athlete, you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. And I think with the athletic side, I think for me, it was the competitive nature coming out of sports and wondering what type of career could I go to that was as similar as possible without being in sports. And I ended up in sales too, just for like a small stint, but I learned so much about personalities, about literally just being able to communicate with people and build relationships. So I certainly loved sales. But my question to you is, as you had such a successful career in sales, what exactly made you go into sales training? Was it literally because you were so good, or did you actually want to? Was that your goal?
Yeah, it kind of found me. You know, it's like books. I actually tell people you rarely find a book; it finds you. I think that happens with careers as well. Courtney, it was the oddest thing. I was actually on a Monday morning, sitting kind of miserable with 24 other apprentice field underwriters, waiting for the management team to come in and the sales trainer to come in for our Monday morning sales training class, and which weren't a whole lot of fun. If you've ever seen the movie Glengarry Glen Ross, and if you haven't, go see it. That was our meeting. And but the management team, they all went out for breakfast and they got a car kind of a double parked and they couldn't get out. So you talk about fate. I was just standing by the phone and it rang in the room and I picked it up and I'm like, yeah. And they said, who is this? I says, Jolles. They said, all right, listen, don't tell anybody, but we're stuck. Just get up and do something. And I said, what do you mean do something? He said, just go do something, Jolles. So I was like, okay. So I got up, but I had to, like I said, I had some acting in me. So I knew this live, die, quit story. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to teach that as a director would teach it to actors. I'm going to show them where to pause and where to slow down and speed up. I'm going to show them where to bring their pitch up and down. I'm going to direct that script. And an hour later, when they came in, the room was buzzing and they just gave me the line sign like, you just keep going. But I know in my head, it was like, oh my goodness, I think I just found it. I'm getting a real performance fix out of this. I love teaching, but I want to make more than a teacher. And so maybe if I go into corporate training, I can get the best of both worlds. But that's how it found me, just picking up a phone that day.
I think that's so interesting because I think of my time in sales training, and that would have been so much fun just to have your personality in there, like training, because I could remember distinctively those were like sometimes like 2 weeks long, like very intense sales training. But it was that idea I learned exactly what they wanted as far as like the script goes. We did the role playing, but it was funny because, especially like as my first time with my first company, I got out into the field and Rob, I was so scripted.
Right.
I was literally like a robot. And so I laugh about it. I still talk to my manager about it. We still stay in touch, but it was one of those ideas of I really enjoyed sales training, but you're right, like incorporating that humor, I bet could have been so much fun
Yeah.
taking it out into the field, you know?
Yeah, and I'm not shoving you in another book, but I really felt like with the last book that I wrote, it's kind of a trilogy for me of sales. I wrote a book called Customer Centered Selling, published by Simon and Schuster. It was my This Is How You Sell. I wrote the book that you held up called How to Change Minds because I thought, there's so many people that think that sales is all about dollar signs. What the a listener can't see right now is on that cover, and it was meticulous by me. I didn't want any dollar signs. I didn't want a quote saying, I'm going to make you more money. I think we have a moral obligation to help people past their fear of change. But the third part of the trilogy is where we're at right now, which is nobody taught me really how to say the words. They just said, say this. Okay. And as we get more experience, we learn. But I'll give you another quote of mine. It's somewhere. I don't even know. I think it's in that third book. It's not the words, it's the spaces between the words that make us believable. And who's teaching that? We need to spend more time on that because that's what makes us believable and authentic.
That's so true. And that was kind of, it probably leads me into my next question, but 32 years of professional speaking. And so, my question to you is before we get to the lessons that you learned along that, what actually got you into professional speaking?
Yeah. And by the way, I want you to know not that you reach a certain time where you don't brag about your years, but that's 32 on my own. I'm not counting Xerox. I'm not counting, a New York Life. So it's a few more. It's a few more than that, but I've aged well. Don't
There
worry,
you go,
everybody.
right?
I'm still sharp as a tack, I believe. All right.
You are, Rob.
Thank you. Once again, fate. I was doing a program for Xerox and we brought in an outside speaker. And Xerox didn't do that a whole lot because we really prided ourselves in having what we felt were the green beret of sales trainers. Xerox, particularly in the 80s,
Mhm.
was known for its sales training, and its sales trainers were everybody who got in there had to be a top-notch salesperson to qualify for the training position. But in came this guy, and he spoke and I spoke, or vice versa, and they did a detailed evaluation. And I remember the guy was getting paid $1,500. I remember that number, which is actually very low for a professional speaker, but maybe back then not so low. All I know was I was fixated on it. It was like, my goodness, he's getting $1,500 for an hour. I wonder if I could do that. So I had a little extra juice in the tank when I got my hour, but they showed us the evaluations, and I'm not naming anybody there, but I destroyed him, and it gave me this next thing of, I think I can play in that sandbox. I think I can get out there and do this. I've got the content. I think I got the delivery. Now do I have got the guts? But that one delivery made me begin to kind of map out my path to I refer to it as like scratching an itch. And for anybody who's ever had a dream, you don't have to be a professional speaker. You ever have a dream, it's an itch you got to scratch. You only have so long to scratch it. Okay. Meaning, you got to take your shot. And I think the mantra for me was, okay, if I fail, what's the, I'll dust myself off. I'll get back up. I'll put one foot in front of the other. I'll keep going. But if I don't try this, I'm going to spend the rest of my life thinking, I wonder if I could have done it. So I felt I couldn't lose, and out I went.
That's incredible. And Rob, I have been talking about what you were saying, just like that last part of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I've been talking about it so much because my idea is to really live life to the fullest, because the worst thing that I perceive is that fast forward, you're in your 80s, like God willing, you're sitting and you're reflecting. And if you did not do what you wanted to do, or that what if, I just
Yeah,
don't want to live like that, you know?
yeah, you
And
and me
so
both.
it really does. Like, I think it motivates you when you think about that to just go for your goals, for your biggest dreams, because inevitably you're going to make mistakes along the way. But I think regret would have to be like the worst thing as you reflect back for like, man, I wish I would have gone for that. So I'm so happy you brought that up.
Yeah, I'm with you. And remember, what's the
Mhm.
worst that will happen? You get punched in the nose. I didn't do it. I thought I could. I couldn't do it. So I'll go and I'll be a trainer for Tweezer Industries. It'll be okay. But you're right. Sitting there and going, well, I had my shot and I didn't take it. Ooh, that scared me.
I am all about living life to the fullest, Rob. I'm all about it.
That's your
So
branding. I know that.
so true. But staying on this particular topic, what were maybe some lessons throughout the years through your professional speaking that you have learned?
Yeah, I'll give you one that just came to me a week ago. Okay, and it was a story that I read from Tina Fey, who had been talking
Mhm.
to Steve Martin, and she had complimented him that he had been on a Letterman show, I believe it was, and that he did really well. And he said, "Well, thank you, but you do know that I have to kill every time." And I really leaned back, and because I've always had this autobiography in my head of called The Organ Grinder's Monkey. My wife hates the title, okay, but I see myself as, if you don't know, an organ grinder is a lot of times to make more money. They would have a little monkey, and when you put a quarter on the box, that monkey jumped up there and gave you the best dance he had. And I thought, I don't see it as demeaning. When you're a professional speaker, I'm going to Topeka. Somebody said, "What are we doing in Topeka?" And I've actually said, somebody put a quarter up on a box. They walk away like, what the heck's he talking about? But that was going to be my autobiography. And I decided, I'm going to change it. And I'm going to change it to kill every time. Every time. I think that's the secret. I think to kill every time, just like on this podcast, you've got to constantly be reinventing, constantly be looking, can I find something that I could do that would make me 1% better? Look, you don't become an NCAA champion because you're just going through the moves that everybody else is going through. You got to keep evolving. Try something that's just so little, but in your world, maybe that's 0.1%. That's the difference between victory and defeat. Why would we ever stop pursuing that? So to answer your question, I'm going to go with kill every time. You won't, but you're going to try.
I think that's great, Rob. And to your very point, just that idea of being able to evolve with just constant change today as we know it. I mean, think about technology. It's obviously always evolving, but even when you start like certain entrepreneurial pursuits, I I get a thrill out of trying something new. I'm past the part of like embarrassment if it ever were to happen. I mean, I've been embarrassed. It's not the first, it's not going to be the last, Rob. So
Right.
you really do. I think once you get over that, you you adapt much quicker. And I just want to spend some time on that, like the idea of adaptability and how you've applied it to your career. I mean, obviously, professional speaking, sales training, sales in general that you started with, you've been evolving and adapting in these different occupations. So, could you just talk about adaptability in one's career and how important that is?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the first rule of thumb is don't ever be afraid of it. I mean, we're kind of back to, you'll hear the story. I tried this new thing and it didn't work. It made me worse. Okay. But what about the other 15 times? I mean, it's a numbers game. It's not just because you change doesn't mean it's always going to work the first time. But are we really going to use that for an excuse not to evolve? So I'll give you an example. The first book I ever wrote was a book called How to Run Seminars and Workshops. I love that book. It has in one of the chapters is AV, audiovisual equipment. And I wrote that book in 1993. Well, thank goodness Wiley has allowed me to update it 4 different times. But because the first one, I was telling you which side to stand on next to the overhead projector, okay? And, how to keep your sheet from blowing off because the little fans would catch the ends of it. Okay, we had little tricks for that. Focus on a quarter, how to focus on, get it focused without giving up what you're trying to get them to look at too early. All kinds of wonderful things. Can you imagine how somebody looking at that would say, I got the wrong book, and or somebody seeing somebody present that way and would say, how much did I pay for this? Even though the content may be good. I don't ever want to be the guy that gives up on technology. I mean, when I retire, whenever that is, then I might go, okay, everybody have at it. But while I'm in the game and while my motto is kill every time, I better be on the front edge of every piece of technology. And believe me, from travel to delivery to audiovisual to the way we write to the way we do this podcast. Have you ever heard of something called Jotform?
I have not.
Oh, I have, because I've just incorporated it. And Jotform is an example. I'm sure there's others like it that allows me to send one link and then retrieve your bio, your hook, some questions, your book cover, your picture, everything. All I've done is send you a link and get out of the way. It comes back when it's completed and then sends you another link so you can automatically get to my calendar with Calendly. You use Calendly or some sort of calendar program? Okay, that's an evolution. I know people are like, I don't want to do that. Okay, send out 15 emails so you can figure out which Tuesday at what time. No, but that's my point of most of the technology is being designed to help us, including AI. I'm not running from it. I'm embracing it. When I retire, maybe I'll let you handle it and tell me about it. But why would I put up my hands now? I'm still in the game.
That's so true. And I think you said it wonderfully, like just at the end with AI being able to acknowledge that it's been here, obviously, it's only going to continue to evolve. So you really do like you have to learn it or you will be left behind. And so I think that's so important with multiple industries for that matter that'll obviously be affected positively. There's pros and cons and everything, but without a doubt, like adaptability, I do have to agree with you that it's very applicable in different career paths too. So you have been speaking about all these different books, like I said, 5-time best-selling author, Rob. So what got you into becoming an author alongside all the professional speaking that you do?
Well, two things. First of all, I used to deliver these programs for Xerox called Train the Trainer. And
Mhm.
so I was the guy for 6 years who trained every instructor for Xerox, and it was a 5 day program. But what at the end of the 5 days, you would use everything you learned, and we only let 8 students in at a time because you had to deliver a 30-minute presentation. And one of the tricks of the trade at Xerox, and for me, when I teach trainers how to teach or professional speakers how to speak, is I'm not all that interested in your content. That I'm trying to get people interested in your content. So there's a sales element to what we teach. How do you sell not to one person, but to an audience of 10 or 100 or 1,000? There's a process in place. Well, I would teach this process, and at the end of the week, because the requirement was you couldn't talk about a Xerox product. We really wanted to hear something that you had passion for so that the product itself wasn't getting in the way. Well, people would talk about, climbing a mountain. I wanted to climb that mountain. People would talk about, riding a horse. Well, I want to ride a horse. One guy came in, talked about writing a book. I want to write a book. But when they delivered the presentation well, I was like a prisoner of my own techniques. They did it so well that they were selling me on all these different things. Help people who are literate. I want to teach people who are literate. I really, the mark of a good presentation. They were moving me. So one guy did. He gave a presentation on how to write a book. That, and when I did leave, I realized I better get stepping this up because you can't be a professional speaker and get the kind of income that you want, because when you're on the road, you're away from your family. So you want it to count. You don't want to go out for $100. Okay. So to do that, you really should have a book. It's a marketing tool. It's a credibility tool. But answering your question, it was a guy named Bob Camp who had written a benchmarking book. And when he got done, I went, I'm writing a book. One last thing, I found a book called How to Write a Book, which he talked about in the presentation. You have to cite your sources. I went and got that book by Robert Mager, and I followed it word for word, sentence for sentence, and it was turning the page. Okay, now you must do that. Okay, I'm doing that. I'm that kind of guy. If it doesn't work, I don't want to blame me. I want to do everything you tell me to do just the way you tell me. And then if it doesn't work, okay, we'll figure it out. But that was it. Bob Camp.
That is so
Should send him a
exciting.
thank you note.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
so exciting because I love always going back to the very beginning of what it was like. Like I said, you've
Mm-hmm.
had literally a successful career. And when you look back, when you wrote that first book, when it came to your home, like perhaps on your steps in the
Mm.
box, what was that feeling like?
It was amazing, but I'll tell you the better feeling than the box. The better feeling than the box. And it was for one particular book. It was my second book.
Hmm.
First book, I was following this book by Mager. I was on chapter 14. Now it's time to send out your proposals. I sent out 3 proposals. I got 2 offers. I thought, oh, this book thing is easy. Apprentice Hall and John Wiley & Sons both made an offer. Yay. Oh, boy. Then I wrote what I thought was like the best book I'd ever written. It was Customer Centered Selling. 2 years. 2 years of no, 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 no. So finally, I got come to New York. We want to talk about this. I have to be careful because I'm getting emotional. It was such an amazing meeting because it's changed the trajectory of my career. Most of my presentations were in sales. I was talking to sales groups. I really wanted this book, and I was sitting in there. And they, said, well, you know what? We're going to make you an offer, such and such. I was like, I was very cool. Unfortunately, I wasn't emotional in the meeting,
Oh,
but I was very cool. Like, of course you do. And I got in the elevator. The
that
elevator
confidence.
doors closed, and I wasn't weeping, but I was very emotional, very emotional. So when the book showed up, that was great too. But
Mhm.
when you put your heart and soul in something and you finally get a yes after a lot of no's, that's the one you remember. And that's why I'm emotional right now telling this story, because I don't tell it very often. I don't think about it very often. I should. Wonderful moment.
I mean, those are the moments that we remember. That's why I love going back to the very beginning because over time, at least speaking for myself, it's always like, okay, what's next? What's next?
Yeah.
And when you actually just stop and savor those moments and celebrate those wins along the way, those are really what you will remember. Like you said, how meaningful it was
Yep.
to walk into that meeting. And I just love reviewing those times, like from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And obviously leading up to like I said, 5-time best-selling author.
Yep.
Now you have a total of 7 books. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, total of 7. Now, one of them, I hope maybe I might be able to push across the finish line. We'll see. It just recently came out. It's a book called "It's a Blarticle," and it just hit on April 1st. So it's the ebook is out or whatever. Um, I'll give that one a nice hard push. But yeah, it's been exciting. This last one, mine are all conventionally published with publishers, but I wanted something called a lead magnet for people. Again, this is evolution, right? Some
Mhm.
people going, fibbly, flabbity, lead what? No, you're in the game, be in the game. Lead magnet is something that says, I want you to give me your email address so I can send you stuff of mine. Okay. And people go, why would I do that? Well, what if I give you a book? Okay, maybe I'll sign up for your whatever it is. It's called a lead magnet. So I wanted to own this one so I could give it away. When you conventionally publish, if I give you a book, it's a lovely thing, but somebody's got to pay for it. It's going to be me because the publisher wants their 85%. So I wanted to be able to own this, my own ISBN. I tell you, it was an interesting process. I really liked it. I may do it again, but that's the newest one.
I mean, that's fascinating though, to write all those books. How long maybe did that last one take you, just for example?
Well, the last one's a bad example. Of course, I'll answer your question because everyone's going to go, what? But that last one didn't take me long at all. I've been writing what I call blarticles, blog articles. I trademarked the term for 16 years, every 2 weeks. I got 440 of them, I believe it is. All I wanted to do, because who's going back and finding something from 13 years ago? You're not going to, it's on the website, by the way. Good luck tunneling that far back. Imagine how many pages you're going to go back for that one. So I cherry picked 45 of the ones that I like the best. And I put them in 3 different categories: performance, persuasion, and personal growth. And I love the way it came out, but it's almost like 45 very short stories. And because part of my legal definition for a blog article, blarticle, is got to be 750 words or less. Now, in the book, you'll see I always not a legal definition. That one I had to get through and through legally. But actually, whenever I refer to it, it's 750 words or less. Dot dot dot. Usually, because sometimes I'll go a little over. And I'm the creator of this damn thing. So, but this one was a little easier. Normally, a book takes if you're really grinding it out, and I like word counts per week, I would hope for, let's just say, roughly 6-7 pages a week. Do the math. It's usually going to take me about 3 months. And then there's the copy editing, things like that. Nice thing is if you go conventional, then all that's handled. When you publish a book on your own, you need to find a copy editor. You need to find graphics. You need to find distribution. When you go through a regular publisher, and that's why they take most of the profit, they pay for everything, and you pretty much get out of the way. So it's that part's easy, but the writing part, that's just in the pit grinding away.
That's right. Well, while we're still on the topic of your books, one in particular, The Way of the Road Warrior. Now, this book, from my perspective, it was a little bit different in that
Yeah.
it focused more so on life in comparison to so much of business. So, could you maybe speak about this particular book?
Yeah, love that book. And that book almost got me on Oprah, by the way. I was actually in line, meaning I had gone through, met with them. I was in queue, as they say, and she retired. How dare she? But back to your question. I started keeping a journal. I encourage anybody who's listening, keep a journal. We're talking about positivity. Keep a journal. And don't worry about filtering it too much. But there'll be a time where you're going to want to go back and reflect. Well, I can reflect on over 2,000 pages over decades of every trip I've ever taken in business. And a couple things that I did right, a couple things I do differently. But I was keeping this journal, and all of this, and foolishly, foolishly, I had this rule. I would actually send it to my parents once a year, and the rule was, basically, don't ding me up for editing because I will never look back on the journal because I don't want to rewrite history. It's an interesting thing. It's foolish, but very, very interesting. what I realized all of a sudden when I went back and looked at them was for every 10 stories, maybe 9 of them weren't that interesting, but one of them was. And one of them had a message to it, had a moral to it. Why wouldn't I want to be looking at that? Now I have the ability to not only take a picture of what's happening, but analyze it and learn from it. And so I went through these thousands of pages and realized I have enough stories here to really start not to kind of set it up of lessons in loss, lessons in humility, lessons in fear, and every lesson I was identifying, I had a story, and so I would open it up and define what fear really is, walk you through a story in italics, and then come out of it and say, basically, here's what I learned from it. So that was a really interesting book because you're right. Again, I didn't quite know I was writing a book on that one, but it was a lot of fun to write and revisit. And from that day forward, at the end of every year, I always go back and look at my journal and figure out the messages and not just don't just take a snapshot. Um, a lesson. Isn't that what wisdom is, by the way? Wisdom is why the reason why older people. I'm a spring chicken, but the old person in the teepee, the wise man or the wise woman, you know
Mhm.
why they're wise? Because they're older, because they've had more experiences. And if they're really wise, they can articulate what they've learned. And that's what a journal can do, but we can't be foolish like Rob. Can't just write about it. At some point we have to look at it, maybe not that moment, and disseminate, figure out what it was we're learning. Do that, and you can't help but become wiser.
That's so true. And it reminds me of just that idea of reflecting, of being able, like you said, to go back. Sometimes I look back just even months. I definitely journal all the time. So I think it's interesting though, because when you go back in time, sometimes it's happened actually. Other times it's something very similar. And so the reason I say that is the power of literally putting a pen to paper. I don't know what it is, Rob, but there's something so powerful about that that really like kickstarts, like gets you in motion of thinking about obviously what your vision is, what you want to accomplish. But then you're right. Like when you're able to go back and we talk about those small wins, like, along the way, but being able to reflect back and say, wow, like that actually did happen. And I did write that down. Isn't that
Yeah.
neat?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it
It-
is. And then you become a mentor for other people because they go, well, I don't know what to do because the client's doing this, whatever. It's like, you know, that happened to me one time. But here's what I learned from it, and that's the key. I on a red eye one time, Courtney, I don't know whether I was asleep, awake, or somewhere in the middle. If anybody's ever taken a red eye, you know what I mean, where you're in this quasi whatever. So I woke up and I had this vision, this vision of I know what wisdom is, and I wrote it down, and it was one of the few times where you write down dreams or something. You wake up in the morning and go, "What is this nonsense?" This one I liked, even when I woke up later. I said wisdom consists of the definition of wisdom. Wisdom consists of three things. It consists of success,
Mhm.
failure, and a conscious knowledge of the lessons learned from each. So if all you've been is successful, you're blessed. Yeah, I wouldn't mind swapping seats with you. I wouldn't necessarily call you wise, but you are a very fortunate individual. If all you've had is loss, my heart goes out to you. I'm so sorry, and I wish there's something I could do, maybe lend a hand. But if you had a little each, like most people, and that's where the journal comes in, and you can really stop and figure it out, that is wisdom. And you can't buy it, but you got to have a little bit of the first two to get there.
That's so true. And just like you were saying, though, with regards to the power of storytelling, like
Mm,
when you were writing in your journal and being able to share those experiences with others, I think storytelling it can be so inspirational to people because,
yeah,
like you said, you've lived it. And I could certainly attest to the fact, and I've spoken about this a lot, but with success, I mean, yeah, it's fun. I mean, you get the pat on the back from people, high five, so forth, but you really learn, and like true development of character
yeah,
is built in the trenches, Rob, when you think something's going to happen and it doesn't and you're sitting back and you're like, whoa, this is not how I planned this to be. But those are the times really that you learn so much. And so when we talk about like failures or so forth, I just do like, I'm able to, and that's another thing, you have to be very honest with yourself of like a process that didn't work. And you're like, okay, now I know what not to do and to proceed forward in a more effective or efficient way. But it is, I think storytelling could help people. Like I said, if it's for inspiration or what not to do. So maybe save them time that you unfortunately had to learn from. So
Yeah.
I,
Well, Courtney, you've been very kind and you mentioned the books and everything. Isn't that nice? But, we learn from failure, like you said. How about if I tell you this story? How about if I tell you that I got laid off from only once in my life, but I got laid off on a team of only 8 people. Okay. And only one person got laid off, and it was me. And I was the superstar of this contract. It was the Farmers Home Administration contract. They wanted a trainer. A trainer. I was the star. They actually upped the contract to film only me out and make videos. I mean, I couldn't have been more successful. Problem was, I kept telling people, I'm your trainer. I'm not your writer. I don't like writing. Who writes? No, I'm not writing. And say, okay, good. Well, you were one heck of a trainer. Well, the contract ended. And they all they could do was hunker down and respond to RFPs. They had to get rid of one person. They said, well, we got to get rid of the guy who keeps telling us he can't write. Okay. So I don't think we should celebrate our faults. I think we should attack them. And when I got done feeling sorry for myself, I signed up for a writing class. 5 bestsellers later, I learned a few things, but from not being a writer, really. Okay. So that's what I mean of when life punches you in the nose, and who hasn't had been punched in the nose? If you haven't, it's common. It's what you do with it, right? I don't want to sound corny, but I think that I'm very proud of the fact that it's not like I came from a writing background. I made myself a writer. Now, I will tell you that the person who laid me off, first book I wrote when it came out and it became a bestseller, I happened to have stuffed one in the guy's mailbox just so I thought he might want to see it. But that's neither here nor there. I just thought I'd let you know.
that's hilarious, Rob. You know, that's great. I think I look back at even my career like in sales and my first position, I have so many fond memories. I mean, of course it was my first like real corporate job. My manager, he taught me so much. Like he taught me not just about like how to sell the product, but he really took time because I was so young at that time too, but to really develop me as far as understanding the industry, but taking time to teach me those lessons that would really help me later on in my career. But what was interesting, it was like after, I don't even know, it was like a year and a half, overnight, 70 of us contract sales force cut. And it's a 5 o'clock conference call. You just knew something was going to be good with that. And so the reason I say that though is I will never forget that moment when I was actually in another city at that time. I was still traveling overnight and I was just walking and I'm thinking like, is this real? Like this is real life. Like I have rent, I have things I have to pay for. And so you're right though. Like I think I learned, okay, I'm going to throw myself a pity party just for one day. I'm going to get back out on that job search. But it makes you hungry because that's like real life, obviously. Like you literally have to pay your bills, but you become more hungry, I think, from those experiences to like gain and rise and hopefully, like I said, even stronger than, where you left off. So I learned that very first time. It was very memorable because I think obviously it was the first time I got laid off, but how you move forward. I mean, I was just talk about that athletic mentality. I
Right.
mean, I was just go for it at that point. So I think it teaches you valuable lessons. But speaking of athletics, what did you learn as far as being an athlete? Like, what are some really good lessons that you would transfer into your career?
Yes. Now, this question I was ready for because I'm going to give you an exclusive, something I've never talked on my podcast or really professionally ever. Most people don't know this about me unless they're my family because I
Mhm.
don't bring it up a lot. But I figured, you know what? She's an athlete. I can bring this up. What I learned as an athlete, I was a point guard, by the way. I was a basketball player, and I played as hard as I could. But fortunately, Courtney, you and I have never been in the same room. I'm very impressive on screen. Unfortunately, I never, I get mad at my doctor when he calls out how tall I am. I keep going, no, that's 5'10". He goes, all right, 5'10". Now, I will say he's in the nines, but he keeps wanting to go a half, a quarter. I'm like, just stop with that. We're rounding. We're 10, 5'10". So I was always fighting my body, fighting the size. I got my teeth knocked out. I broke a couple of bones. I played it hard. I played at a fairly high level.
Mhm.
I tried out for the University of Maryland, but it was I was a walk on and I didn't make it. I
Mhm.
did play intramural and I played all-star games and I played for my high school and stuff like that. Okay.
Mhm.
But one time I got into a race and some of these guys in the dorm, they're running. I'm like, how far is the race? 13. It was a half a marathon. I'd never run ever. And I didn't even have running shoes. And I said, that sounds like fun. They said, well, you can't run. I said, I'll go. And so I went home. I got my dad's shoes. They were about a size too big. I had to wear 3 pairs of socks. I know it sounds like I walked 5 miles to go to school, but stay with me on this. Anyway, they were pretty good runners. I beat every one of them. And I got this thrill of, I had no idea there was going to be a finish line with people at it. I'd never been to a race. And so I thought, look at this. I'm not fighting my body. Matter of fact, my body's kind of accepting this a little bit more. So I started training. I thought 13's cool. I went 13-1. I wonder what 26-2 feels like. So I trained for a marathon, started running a couple marathons. I went, this looks cool. So I actually, in 1982, was watching the Wide World of Sports and saw the fourth ever World Ironman from Maclua Kona. And at that time, it hadn't exploded yet. So I was on the phone at the end of the broadcast. I never called ABC. I called ABC. I was like, how do you sign up for this thing? Anyway, long story short, I got into the fifth World Ironman ever in Kailua Kona, which is, when it was fairly new. It wasn't a lottery yet. If you had the guts to show up with a bike and you wanted to mix it up, go ahead. Now, my race happened to be the year where a woman went down and got up and went down and got up and really lost control of her system and was crawling to the finish line when she got passed by another runner. And that's when Jim McKay, who had done like 5 Olympics, said most exciting conclusion to a sporting event he ever covered. And Ironman blew up. But I was in the race where it was just blowing up, and it was very exciting. So I still, to this day, they used to give. I still can only show you, but they used to give away little Ironman medals. So I still wear my Ironman, and that was. But I loved distances. I still swim in open water swims and things, and love to compete. I love races and events where the it's not your body or how big or tall you are. It's who gives up first. That's the race I love. And so it's a metaphor almost to my career because I don't, one thing I'm not going to do is give up. I'm not giving up on stage. I'm not giving up as a business person. And so, because it's not always easy to field gigs, but you field them and field them and field them. You keep fighting. But yep. So anyway, competed in the fifth World Ironman ever.
That is incredible. So I want to take it back though. So
Mm.
when you were your first race, like you said, I mean, right now, Rob, like I run all the time, but I don't run for time. And I actually don't, I know this sounds silly. I always go for an hour and that's walk and run, if that makes
Hmm.
any sense.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, I think to join a running club, I'm so nervous because I know that they like kind of split you up, but what I'm trying to say is I've done a 10K, but that next step to do a half a marathon, I just don't know. Like, so how did you literally just like tie up and you're like, yeah, let's go do this? Like, did you even train whatsoever?
I think I ran 3 times.
Wow.
Well, I played a lot of basketball, so I knew my cardio was good.
Mhm.
Although that's I'm sprinting and stopping and sprinting and stopping and cutting and moving. All of this was different. I actually only thing I did was I started fairly slowly, and then as when I passed the first guy, I went, holy hey, I'm not I'm moving up, and then I just started reeling these guys in. Probably was fortunate. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I'm not telling you I felt good the next day, but I knew I loved the event because it was like, oh, this is an event where you just don't quit. And back then for me, like my son runs, and he ran his first marathon. I'm very proud of him, but he would explain to me how even when he trained, he runs and he walks and he walks and he runs and he runs and he walks. I don't know what it is about me, but I thought of myself almost like Rocky. Like, Rocky didn't win the fight, but he didn't stay down when he got knocked down. He even said, I'm not going to stay down. I thought I never walked. I walked a little in the Ironman, by the way. That's the first time I ever walked. But that was tough. I just had 112 miles on the bike behind me, and that was, I was hurting. But other than that, I've never walked in a race because I always thought, well, that's kind of for me. I'm not doing that now. It looks like everyone walks and runs now, which is fine. But I'm not sure I'm getting at your answer. I'm just telling you that for me, it was just a stubbornness. It was like, well, even if you have to slow down, can you just keep going? Can that be your victory? And so that's always what I targeted as. I'm not going to stop running. I don't care how much it hurts. I can do this. I'll recover tomorrow. I remember a quote, last thing, but I think it was Jim Fixx who said, runners are the sickest group of healthy people you'll ever meet.
That's so true. Oh my gosh. Well, and like when you talk about triathlons, I mean, like kudos to you. I mean, talk about we're just running, let alone obviously the swimming part. I've always spoke about this even with other people, but the swimming part is, I would have to say, arguably one of the most difficult for people, generally speaking, because I think about, even if I did like I don't even know, not a half one, but like a sprint, if you will, like triathlon, I could definitely do the biking and the running. But for the swimming, there's something about swimming. I think that is arguably one of the most difficult sports there is out there. Obviously, full body. But how did you train for the triathlon? Did you have a coach to get you to that level?
Yeah, I had a friend of mine who was a kinesiology major at Maryland. And he and I were good friends. So he kind of laid out a training regimen, although it was so new, no one really knew how to train for it. We didn't really. I wish I had a Schwinn bike. I mean, nobody was. The bikes weren't all that light. It really was kind of lace them up and just go, just do this thing. But I had that guy. And to your point, my weakest sport by far was the swimming. But I have a cousin of mine. I have 36 first cousins on my dad's side. We have one of everything. So one of them was actually a 13 and under. He held the state record for butterfly. Very good, successful scholarship athlete, swimmer. Now, so he was the one that got me in the swim. Okay. Now, I will tell you, in hindsight, when it's all over, I told you, what am I doing now? I'm not doing a whole lot of running. I swim. Swimming, the dirty little secret is swimming is the easiest part of a triathlon, even if you're not great at it. It's 2.4 miles in an Ironman. If you're a bad swimmer, and let's say if you're a good swimmer, you might come out of that water 2.4, probably going to be 25. This is, hang on, sorry, I'm just working the math because I was not up with the great swimmers. But let's say you're doing 25 minutes a mile, 22 minutes a mile, 44. So let's say 50, but 50 minutes for a fast, but that's really good swimmer. Okay. When you go on and a bad swimmer might be an hour and a half. Oh my goodness. You know the difference between 112 miles when you have a good cyclist and a bad cyclist? It's not 40 minutes. It's 4 hours. Okay. There's a much bigger play there. By the time you get to a marathon, nobody's barely getting to a 3-hour marathon. I mean, we can try, but you're kind of shot, particularly back then when we didn't have the training that we have now. So let's say 3 hours. If you're not so good, 4.5, 5, I guess. I don't know where it is. You see all the plays. And so the easiest part is the swim. And I will say this, because I did a few triathlons. I used to love seeing the swimmers because you could see them lining up. It was like, okay, so you're carrying that swimmer's body. Good luck. Okay, you got 2 miles there and 138, where you're not swimming, where we're going to reel you in and watch you go bye-bye into the back of the pack here. So it's really the most difficult part of a swim, even an open water swim, which I do. Yeah. It's not the distance. It's you got to be careful not to get hit because like I swim a lake swim. It's a 2-mile track basically. And every time you get to a cone, everybody's kind of trying to tuck into that cone. Then you can get wide a little bit. So you're in a dark water. People are swinging their arms and legs. You can't really see anything. So on multiple occasions, I've had my goggles knocked to the side of my head, off my head. That's the part you just got to watch out for. But in terms of making it, nah, even if I have a bad swim, I'll be 5 minutes behind where I should be. Bad bike, I'm an hour where I should be. So anyway, you can
Well,
do the swim, Courtney. You can do the swim.
thank you for that encouragement,
Yeah,
Rob.
yeah. You just got to
But
be
no,
trained.
I really do. Like, I commend you on that. I think that's unbelievable in my opinion. Just even the thought of triathlons, I do. I think that takes. I mean, I'm all about discipline and like commitment, but that's on a whole other level. I mean, especially like I'm 5'1", and so when you talk about like lining up swimmer bodies and stuff,
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know if I fit that, Rob.
I'm glad to hear that, by the way. Now I feel huge. Okay, good.
Like, that's what's so great about being virtual is like people probably think like, yeah, maybe she's 5'6". Nope, I am 5'1".
Yeah, that's funny. That is
but
funny.
I do like this particular podcast. I love that we have spoke about career, sport, those life lessons. And I don't want to miss this though, Rob. You are also a podcast host.
Hmm.
And I do want to mention you have you've hosted over 450 pocket sized pep talks. And this particular podcast you launched over 5 years ago that is currently now in the top 2% of downloads nationally. So, Rob, explain to us just this journey into podcasting. Was there anything along the way that surprised you?
Huh. Well, it was a journey that was brought on by my daughter. I mean, I was talking about it a little bit again.
Mhm.
Here comes 5 years ago. People talking about podcasts. You're going to do a podcast. Moment of truth again for all of us. Okay, who needs a flippity flappity pie? I'm not going to decide no because I don't know how to do it. I'm going to decide no because it might not fit my profession. Well, I think it does fit my profession. And I also thought at some point I'm going to retire. And when I do, I'd love to keep my voice in the game a little bit. I'm very fortunate. I have a daughter in New York who was podcasting at the time and still does. Very good podcaster. Uh, Jessie Jolles, look her up on Instagram. She has over 100,000 followers. She does really well. But Jessie is of my three children is the most like me, and meaning she's a go getter and she will just force whatever it is that she wants on you. And so for a birthday present, she said, Dad, I know you want to do it. As a birthday present, I'm giving you an intro and an outro for a podcast, and I'm going to teach you how to do this thing. And so I had really kind of a tutor, and I thought, well, why would I not do it now? Let's see how this works. And I really have fallen in love with it. I love it. It's wonderful, just like we're doing right now. You're learning about me. I've had you on my podcast. I got to learn about you. That's what a nice thing to be able to do, even when maybe I hang up, the traveling a little bit. I don't want to just walk away from my industry. I've got things to share, so I feel good. We started as well. I have a head start towards retirement. Well, I got one hell of a head start now because like I said, I've been at it for a while and it's working out better than I thought.
I think it's great. Like I love podcasting for that very reason of building community, but like you said, learning from others' stories, being able to allow them to share their story
Mm-hmm.
because, something today I don't know, I've been on this topic about how important it is to really get to know somebody. And the reason I say that is we're all so busy, and today it's like to really stop, take time to hear somebody's story and why are they doing what they're doing, what influenced them. I'm just so passionate about
Mm-hmm.
communication, Rob, and I love the virtual, like if this is what we could do, this is what we could do, but being in person, I don't know, I could be an extrovert, no doubt, but then also I do like being an introvert. But when I'm out there, I get so much energy just talking to you. Like I get re-energized. I don't know, that's me personally, that's my personality. But without a doubt, I don't know, there's something about podcasting. The moment that I started, and when you were talking about this, I really had no clue. I just said, literally, I'm going to start a podcast. I
Right.
don't have any video editing experience, but I'm like, I'm going to find a way, Rob. So I don't know. I do have to agree with you, though, like just the enjoyment of it and just the excitement, like I said, just to hear people's story. But I definitely had to add that particular question into this podcast. But
Yeah. Yeah.
before we wrap up, Rob, we always like to end with a positive quote or a positive phrase. So if you could please provide the community with either one.
All right, I'm going to show you that I always keep this on my desk. So it's actually, I'll read it to you, but it's my quote that I keep on. And, in the world of training, we say when you emphasize everything, you emphasize nothing. So I'm not littered with quotes. I got one quote I keep an eye on because it's very important to me. Because when you're a successful professional speaker, a lot of times, and I'm not patting myself on the back, it almost cost me my marriage. Sometimes when you're successful, you lose sight of things. You go after the successful side, but at what cost? And so I was on the road a great deal, and I was, thought I was the greatest dad and husband in the world, uh, and then I had to adjust. I had to evolve. And so I've always loved this quote, and I've always looked to try and find who wrote it, and you can Google it. I still can't find it, but somebody wrote this, and I love it. And it says, well, I don't have to read it. I know it in my head. It says, we weren't put on this earth to make a living. We were put on this earth to make a difference. And I pay attention to that. I have 3 children. They're in their 30s now. I have my wife. I want to continue to make a difference. And so, I keep that in my mind, because how many times do we make decisions based on, money or this or that? I'm really trying not to let that control my life. And there's a penalty for that. The penalty is you have to work harder. What happens when you're a professional speaker and you're getting booked out a lot? You get booked out more. You know what happens when you're a professional speaker and you start putting your hand up and going, no, I'm only doing so many places. You're not seen as often. You get booked less. So you have to fight a little bit harder. Not a little bit. You fight harder. But so worth it. So that quote has always kept it with me in line here, because it's a little bit like an addiction, travel. And that was the part I was going to talk on Oprah about, when the way of the road warrior of, I'll tell you some life lessons, but I'll tell you the biggest lesson, which is, if you track addiction, if you track grieving, we go through anger, we go through denial. There are stages. It's not that much different for people who aren't around their families, whose families are out of balance. So the fact of the matter is, it's tough to stay in balance, and you got to get up in the morning and try every day, because not every day will it be in balance. So it's sort of like that drinking. You never hear an alcoholic say, I've kicked this addiction. That one day at a time, one day at a time. But that quote helps me keep an eye on one day at a time.
I think that's so important, and what a meaningful quote, because you're right. Even my mentality, and I really do think it comes from sport, but it's that idea of being like 150% in or not doing it at all.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about like being on the road, never experienced it like that, but I could definitely see how you could be kind of like swirled into that, and you could lose sight of the big picture. And
Yep.
so you're right. Just one day at a time, reassessing. I always like to do that. I like to be very reflective, and even being self-aware too, to be able to improve yourself every single day. Like, that's my goal, is to be a better version of myself. Tomorrow is tomorrow, so forth.
Yeah.
But I love that quote. And I know the community is going to be so inspired by this
Good.
podcast episode, Rob. You were
Good.
fantastic.
Thank you.
Congratulations on all of your success. And I
Thank you.
wish you the absolute best as you move forward.
I appreciate that, Courtney. It's always nice talking to you. Thank you.